The next call is a split call. Jan Logie, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure. I rise to speak in this, the third reading of the Coroners Amendment Bill for the Green Party. And the Green Party, as previously stated by my colleague Dave Clendon, will be supporting this bill. And I'd like to spend the time in my contribution firstly, as with other members, acknowledging the people who shared their personal experiences with the committee. Grief is a very significant thing to share, and I think when people make that effort and the efforts in the hopes of helping produce good public policy, we should acknowledge them for that effort. And I would like to talk mostly on the points about deaths within prison and the youth suicide reporting, and acknowledge the work of the committee in making the improvements to the bill around specifically relating to deaths in prison. My understanding of the bill as it was first introduced would have meant that the coroner could only demand an inquiry for a death in prison if the coroner was satisfied that there had been some negligence or misconduct, which really presupposes the outcome of the inquiry at the beginning of the process. So it was really good to see that the committee has worked through that problem and shifted the presumption the other way round, where now the coroner is enabled to use their judgment to decide if they could have reasonably expected the death given the knowledge that they have of that person's health status and health records. And my colleague Dave Clendon, initially obviously we had concerns about the change, and he spoke to several coroners, is my understanding, and they spoke to him about the changing demographics in our prisons and that we have an increasingly ageing population in our prisons, and so as a result people are more likely to be dying of natural causes that should not be take up the resources of the coroner being spent on inquiring into natural deaths. It does, for me, raise a question and a bit of a sad indictment on us as a society, though I do have to acknowledge the thought of somebody dying of age-related diseases while in prison, or dying of cancer while in prison, when we've known that that's going to happen. That does seem to me an extra level of punishment that is not necessary in terms of ensuring the security of our society. The other point I would like to speak on, which has been widely canvassed, but is the consideration of the reporting of youth suicide. And I know that there is a call from there has been from a lot of parents about wanting more liberalisation, as well as the media, of a sense at times that we're stifling an acknowledgement of how big a problem this is in our society. And when we do have one of the highest rates of youth suicide in the world and very high rates of suicide generally, I can understand that feeling from people and are wanting for this to be dealt with publicly. However, I have worked in youth health and have a background of seeing that impact on young people, of where suicides are covered in our media in fictional sense as well as reported, that has actually directly contributed to an exacerbation of some young people's mental health issues, to a point where they have attempted suicide on the basis of that trigger. And I even think of my experience as a young person of spending many years feeling suicidal. Part of that was as a result of how commonly it was talked about. And it was only when I became an adult working in the area that I realised that actually feeling suicidal wasn't normal. And that is not a situation we would ever want to see encouraged in our society. So the restrictions to reporting on recognising that it could be a cause but not naming the place, if it could identify the method or naming the method, seems a sensible place to come down. Thank you.
I call